Dune Part 2 is an epic spectacle of a movie, and to pull it off, the production team had an epic task on their hands. Today, I'll be looking at how they did it, revealing all the secrets behind on-set improvisations, shooting locations, Easter eggs, effects, and all the plans for a potential Dune 3.
It's easier for me to think about the future if I say, okay, last year.
First off, Austin Butler's performance is one of the highlights of the movie as Foyd Rautha. But did you know his kiss with the Baron was completely improvised? Butler knew he needed to show complete devotion to his on-screen uncle, but Stellan Skarsgård had no idea he was about to grab him and lock lips with his co-star. He'd have every right to get HR involved, but according to the Elvis actor, Skarsgård was up for anything. To show more devotion to the Swedish actor, he also took on vocal training to sound like he was really part of the family. Butler revealed he was working with Tim Monick, who's known as the godfather of dialect coaches, and helped him to hone in on Skarsgård's iconic notes. In the past, Monick taught Brad Pitt to talk as if he were from somewhere deep in the mountains of Tennessee, Matt Damon to speak as if he was South African, and Hilary Swank to sound like Amelia Earhart. Question is, where was he when Dick Van Dyke did an English accent in Mary Poppins?
Thank you, sir. Keep an eye skinned.
But that's not all. Butler was clearly a busy boy, as he needed to pack on muscle to turn himself into a merciless killer. For this, he enlisted Duffy Gaver, a straight-shooting former Navy SEAL turned celebrity PT who isn't keen on actors wasting his time. Thankfully, Butler had no intention of doing this, and he got a glowing report from his teacher, who was very impressed with his dedication when working through the compound lifts that were core to getting him battle-ready. Butler wasn't seen in the first Dune, and Zendaya was barely seen as Chane. She was on screen for a whole 7 minutes, bagging $300,000 in the process, causing a bit of a stir amongst fans, feeling like they wanted to see a bit more of her. Well, for Dune 2, they were in for a treat, because she's on screen for a lot longer, which would explain the $2 million she's reported to have made from the sequel. Stellan Skarsgård, who we've already mentioned, must be a glutton for punishment, as he needed to go through another grueling process for his makeup, just like for Part 1. During the 8 hours he spent being made to look hideous, he didn't drink anything and took Imodium pills to avoid having to go to the toilet during shooting days. Don't you think this makes method acting look a little bit lazy? I know Dune is great, but would you bung yourself up for it? Despite the IMAX CEO proudly boasting that the movie was shot with the company's cameras, it wasn't, but it was shot on the next best thing, Arri Alexa 65 and Arri Alexa Mini LF. These are cameras that are designed for an IMAX screen, so you wouldn't have known if you saw it on one of their giant screens. This is also an upgrade on Dune Part 1, which was shot on the Arri LF, without the crucial 65 that makes all the difference. So if anyone says that Dune Part 2 was filmed for IMAX, then they're technically right. If they say it was filmed with IMAX cameras, then you have my permission to strike them down with the most condescending, actually, you're capable of in your best comic book guy voice. One of the most memorable scenes is at the home of the Harkonnens, in the daytime, which we see for the first time as the first movie only showed it at night. Then why is it black and white, I hear you cry? Well, director Denis Villeneuve has revealed that this is because of the black sun that illuminates this scene. But this isn't simply shot in black and white. Infrared cameras were used for this effect. Cinematographer Greg Fraser implemented the methodology of infrared cinematography he'd seen on Zero Dark 30, which was shot a decade earlier, because if it wins you a couple of Oscars, then don't fix it. The movie also used a similar technique to another Oscar winner, Oppenheimer. It was shot new but printed old. What does that mean exactly? Well, let me explain. Dune 2 was shot on Alexa large format movie cameras, a digital system, then had the finished product projected to analog 35mm. This softened the sharpness of the digital images and made them feel old and new at the same time. This was a good fit for a world that had an ancient feel but set 20,000 years in the future. Dune, not Oppenheimer. Unsurprisingly, this Dune movie features locations similar to the first one, so there were similar earthly locations used. But saying that, there are also some very exclusive locations used just for Part 2, which we'll get to soon. For the battle scenes, these were filmed in the backlot of Hungarian-based Origo Studios. This Budapest location is also the setting for some of the movie's lavish indoor sets. The studios and the vast Hungexpo exhibition hall, making up 10,000 square feet of space, were converted to the Harkonnens' black and white homeland of Gedi Prime. I mean, I know the Baron is big, but that's a bit greedy. Now for those new locations I mentioned. For Part 1, the Wadi Rum Valley in Jordan doubles as part of the fictional desert planet Arrakis. This is still the case for the sequel, but this time round a specific area called Al-Sik Gorge was used, right next door to the iconic Jordan location. Also during filming, there's a real eclipse that was captured and used for the movie's opening. The celestial event happened in October 2022, and was visible from all over the country as the moon covered 35% of the sun. Abu Dhabi also makes a comeback to help create the planet Arrakis in both films. But it's Italy that makes a real impact here. It used the city Altivole in the province of Treviso, and in particular the tomb Memorial Brione. This was used for the burial ground with Princess Irulan and Reverend Mother Mahayam. The significant thing about this is it is the first time a film has been allowed to shoot there. Maybe the security guard was a fan of the book. Parts 1 and 2 might have shared sets, but what about Dune 3? We'll look if there's a third installment on the way later. The effects on Dune can be summed up by a rule that Villeneuve had on set. Anything actors interacted with in the frame had to be built by the art department. Just like in Part 1, he was adamant that CGI be used at a minimum, with as much practically done as possible. This explains why the baby sandworm that lives in the Southern Fremen's Maker's Temple is real. Well, a real effect, not a real giant baby sandworm, as they don't exist. A CG worm was a possibility, but they favoured the use of a puppet instead. The shot of the baby worm moving through the sand was actually the biggest challenge for the film's special effects team, because we're not talking about anything like a Muppet here. They built the worm out of 8 balls connected by a chain, and then ran it under the sand on 2 sets of tracks, one for the circular movements and one for the straight path towards the Maker Keeper, played by Alison Halstead. And while we're on the subject of sandworms, when we're watching Paul trying to ride into the sand with one of the huge creatures, we're really seeing Chalamet's stunt double, Lorenz Hideyoshi, on a sandpit in Abu Dhabi. This is built with real sand, built to look identical to the one they'd used for location footage of the worm ride. It wasn't done on location because the team needed to use a place where the action could be better controlled. It might look like an extreme version of someone trying to master a bucking bronco, but it lasted a lot longer than one of those rides. The sequence took 44 days to film and was shot on a set measuring 90 by 24 feet. Is that big? I don't know. What do you think? Another big set piece featuring Paul is when he's protecting Chani beneath a spice harvester. The underside of that harvester is a physical set, but when the scene pulls back to adopt a wider perspective, we're seeing the limited set with CGI on top of it, completing the rest of the vehicle. This is another one of those examples where the interaction is real, then with a little CG cherry on the top to build it out. A few quick Easter eggs on little costume details that have a hidden meaning, before I reveal where the team got the inspiration behind some of the epic sets seen in the movie. First, Chani can be seen using a piece of blue fabric as a headband, most memorably when Paul rides the worm. Villeneuve has explained that when Fremen women fall in love, they wear blue in the film. And at this point, Chani is following a generation of Jaw fans by falling deeper in love with Chalamet. For Princess Irulan's striking headpieces, costume designer Jacqueline West has said that they were inspired by how the nuns' habits framed their face. This allowed Irulan to have certain aspects of the Bene Gesserits, without going all in. Continuing the religious theme, West has also said that the costume gives her the Virgin Mary-esque mantle. Irulan might look more suited as a knight than the mother of a saviour, but for the Sardaukar Army Swords, prop master Doug Harlocker was more than happy to go full Knights Templar when it came to their weapons. He's explained that they're made to reference a version of Excalibur or Templar Knight's lethal broadsword. The sets used on Dune Part 2 are out of this world, literally. Again, not literally, but you know what I mean. A lot of the most iconic backdrops for the action were inspired by earthly quirks that production designer Patrice Vermette wanted to use. For example, there are inset inspirations when it comes to all things Harkonnen. But there's also something else a little more surprising that inspired the decor: septic tanks. Vermette wanted the black, shiny, and new feel of these waste containers to be used as part of the Harkonnen interior. I'm not sure it'll catch on in IKEA. Villeneuve also had a big say when it came to the look of the movie, as you might expect. It was partly down to him that Floyd Ralpher's gladiator fight, filmed with that infrared camera we looked at earlier, was inspired by bullfighting. For the black-clothed Harkonnen servants with distinct curved headdresses, who assist Floyd Ralpher in the arena, he wanted picador silhouettes for those characters, just like in bullfighting, which is a little bit of artistic license differing from Frank Herbert's book. Going back to Butler's character, when Floyd Ralpher arrives on Arrakis to see the damage he has done after bombing Siege Tabur, we see the Cave of Birds set. This was designed to represent giant fingerprints, according to Vermette. Fingerprints are also the Fremen's identity, so it wasn't just the production designer looking at his hands for ideas. So will there be a third installment? Villeneuve insisted on the first book being a two-parter, even though he didn't have the green light for the second movie. Even though Part 1 did well, and he got the sequel he wanted, it wasn't enough for Legendary Entertainment to commit to making it rain in production dollars for Part 3. But with Part 2 making over $700 million worldwide and still counting, they've had their heads turned. In August 2023, Villeneuve told Empire that he had begun developing a script for the third outing. Hans Zimmer had guessed he was working on this third installment of the franchise when the French director visited him when he was composing the film's score and wordlessly left a copy of Dune Messiah with him. That's a pretty big hint. Production company Legendary Entertainment's CEO Josh Grode gave confirmation that a third part had the studio's backing as well, as of April 2024. So unsurprisingly, with a franchise so far that's made a ton of money and had widespread acclaim, they're going to make another one. It'll be based on Dune Messiah, which is the second of 4 novels in the Rise of Atreides, courtesy of Frank Herbert. It seems like if you love sand, then you're in luck, because this franchise is in no danger of going away anytime soon.